I think the word conductor is very significant because the idea of a current being actually passed from one sphere to another, from one element to another, is very important and very much part of the conductor's skill and the craft.
He has to know exactly what he's doing. From the point of view of the composer, first of all, and to be in complete command of the forces he has in front of him. He has to convince the men and women who are playing in the orchestra that if there are 6, 7, 8, or 80, 90, or 150, he knows more than all of them put together.
I think maybe conducting is the only evidence I've ever had that telepathy does exist. And I think the best conductors are really telepathetic.
And all of this while he keeps an absolutely firm hand, an autocratically firm hand, that what comes out is something that he's listening to in his head just before it happens. And with his ears, he's listening to whether it's actually happening the way he wants it to be. Now, that's only the beginning.
The power to convince orchestras and audiences that their view of the music was the right one made legends of the great conductors, even during their lifetimes.
Good. Just make a little crescendo, little by little. Let the third still come through, though.
And a crucial part of that process was rehearsal.
Legatissimo! Legato! Must watch. It's so free. It's got to be like one person singing his heart out, and you're playing like an exercise.
I'll give you plenty of time to get over. Now remember, shh, the great thing about this is you start it really softly. This one with tremendous sort of undercurrent of great nervousness, soft, but something ominous and tremendous about it. And the B wants to be much shorter. Yeah, it's all short. It's all got. They're all got dashes over them. It's like You get one bar right, you get the lot right. There's just some long note somewhere. A place. It's the C that's too long. It's still like that. Now do try. It's the bases I think it's doing. But they both come off after the C. If you keep it on dial, we lift it quick after the C. And get that, it's not nervous enough, it's not soft enough, there's not enough portent about it. And it's a little too slow. Behind.
There's only one way to rehearse an orchestral piece, which is what I do.
What's that?
I take either a Mozart symphony or a Strauss tone poem. I play the whole thing through from beginning to end without a stop. Oh, blessed thing. The orchestra makes a few mistakes, naturally. I play it through a second time. The orchestra makes no mistakes. I then just take a few little difficult parts. I pinpoint them. I emphasize them. I repeat those 3 or 4 times. I really perform.
What the devil's that?
Magic wand, Billy.
What?
Magic wand, Billy.
I thought it was an automatic baton, which relieved me of any responsibility and duty. Of course it's too high. What do you think I am? Samson? Or...
Sometimes.
He was inspired, and he was light-hearted, and he threw it off belying that kind of tief ernst of many of the Germanic traditions. You know, you have to have a long beard and be... Not at all. He threw it off as another one of life's delights.
House ballet music. Bum, bum, one of the bar. Used to be anyway.
What does a young conductor do? Who will never profit by anybody else's experience, thanks to his unconquerable egotism and innate stupidity. Yes. He will take a first-class orchestra, and after playing 20 bars, he will stop, and he'll begin educating them. Fancy educating a body of people like the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. They already know the damn piece 10 lines better than he does. He goes on another 20 bars, stops, starts educating, teaching them. That's why he wants 6 rehearsals, and that's why I can do with 2.
It's all self-parody, and yet the moment that he takes the baton in his hand and the moment that he's off, not what he says, what he does, you feel that he is able to turn a corner more elegantly and with more real sense of savouring the elegance and the sheer allure of the music more than I can think of almost any other conductor.
Arthur Nikisch is considered by many to be the father of modern conducting. He was the first conductor to record a whole symphony, Beethoven's Fifth, but this silent film is the only visual record we have of him in action.
What you actually see on that film is a very disciplined and elegant, classical, if you like, conducting technique where everything is here. You can see how, for example, people said his eyes were mesmerizing because as a result of him conducting up there, the player is forced to look at his eyes. And every conductor virtually that one talks to will tell you that half of what you do is done with your eyes.
Any average conductor can imagine what a score would sound like, but then to infuse it with the extra thing, which is either Beethoven or Brahms or Mozart or Schubert or whatever, that requires a degree of imagination and a degree of projection into the mind of the composer.
Most remarkable musician, a wonderful conductor. Wonderful conductor, you can say that, even though there was no visual proof that he was conducting.
There were two Strauses as a conductor, the one who was interested and the one who was not interested. And very often you had the feeling that he was just serving time or earning his fee and waiting for the card game that came after the performance. So sometimes it would be like this. He would be terribly bored, and in the finale of Fidelio, Beethoven, with his da-da-di-da-dim, da-da-di-da-dim, ba-da-di-da-dim, da-da-di-da-dim, da-da-di-da, looking at the watch, and
Felix Weingartner succeeded Mahler at the Vienna Opera in 1908. Against the prevailing trend, he became known for his meticulous and respectful attitude towards the printed score. In many ways, the German conductor Fritz Busch inherited Weingartner's mantle. Forced out of his homeland in 1933, he went on to become the first music director of Glyndebourne Opera.
Instrumentalists have their whole boyhood and their whole adolescence to study their instrument, on their instrument, to perfect themselves in its technique. But the poor conductor, he cannot do the same. His instrument is this dragon with 80 heads or 100 heads, and how should he practice on this instrument, which is the first time at his disposal when he begins his career? So he comes out as a naive and beginner, and this is a disadvantage which he can make up for only in years of practice.
Walter, I think, appealed to the musical soul of the orchestra more than most conductors. I think maybe they felt they were taking part in a sort of large-scale chamber music. And this is the secret, to come from within an orchestra, to lead them from inside, rather than dictate from outside.
One of the main questions is how to handle persons, how to handle men, how to influence his musicians by word or by his gesture or by his looks. And this is something here, his human qualities have very much to say in this question. If he is a man of warm heart and of sincerity, the musicians, even those who are far superior with regard to routine, will listen to him. If he is not a man who loves nature, if he does not know and love the meadows and the brook, he never could conduct Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. And if he has not the passion, he's not able of ecstasy, he never could conduct Tristan and Isolde of Wagner. But you see how manifold are the demands made on him, and how versatile he has to be in order to fulfill these demands. Now we start with brass. Horns, where are the horns? First horn, first 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Trumpets, first trumpet. First trombone. So let's begin. Cello and bass. We begin espressivo, and then diminuendo, and then again, and then again diminuendo. You understand? So always beginning the theme espressivo and go down. Piano, 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 too loud, too loud. Sing. Sing, sing.
Orchestral players like conductors who don't talk too much. They also very much seem to admire conductors who can do the talking while they're actually playing. It's the act of not playing and having to listen to people that they don't like. And a Walter, or indeed a Scholti, who's a master at that, actually does all their rehearsing while they're actually conducting, while the music's actually going on. So the player doesn't stop playing.
Go on. last tone is piano. You know, forte, piano subito. I'm not quite happy still. When we begin, let the A live. You understand? Think it this way.
He cajoled the orchestra into following me. No, sparks did not fly, and it was gentle, but it was insistent, and it would not stop until he had his way.
Give me letter A. Sing.
There was a gentleness, an apparent gentleness to Bruno Walter, because he was one of the most iron-willed and stubborn of people. But he had a certain courtliness about him.
Now I tell you something. All these figures in first and second final is espressivo. Why? Because you have the end at the end a diminuendo. Otherwise you cannot make a diminuendo. You understand? You are always with espressivo, and at the end is a diminuendo. I begin from the very beginning once more, just to get acquainted with each other. Begin. Begin singing. Yes. Yes. Each time. Sing. Diminuendo, gentlemen. Too loud, oboe. Yes. Sing out. Now, you see? Crescendo, molto.
Walter is a very good conductor, but he is an absolutely other character than I am. You see, it's difficult to speak about this, but you see, he is very conciliating and very elegant and very mild, and I am not.
And he's very romantic.
Very romantic. I am not at all. And he is what we call, but you not misunderstand, he is a moralist. I'm an immoralist. Absolutely.
The technical side of directing a large orchestra was left to the orchestra themselves. We had to become virtually a large chamber group and listen even more attentively to our colleagues in the other sections of the orchestra, because we had no help in precision from Klemperer.
He was a curious introvert character, very basic, very much knowing what he wanted, and yet his way of conveying it was had no how shall I say, didn't have technique or method or manner. It was he stood there with music coming out of him with great authority, and yet I don't remember him really talking to the orchestra. I don't remember his even doing a great deal, but he got his way and the orchestra played, especially in his later years when he just really stood there, but stood there with authority and with conviction. That was a kind of magician.
Klemperer's tempi always had this at the back of his mind, that the music must be articulated cleanly and must have time to breathe. He had no tempo. There was no Klemperer tempo. The tempo was decided by the circumstances.
Klemperer was not concerned with precision. If it happened, he liked it and accepted it. With Furtwängler, precision in orchestral player was not his primary aim. I often had the feeling that Furtwängler actually didn't want this, and his rather, we used to call it puppet on a string, physical way of conducting was in a way rather deliberate. He wanted to avoid the slick modern American whip-crack powerhouse chords. He wanted more weight, more almost heaviness.
wasn't a machine, but in his flexibility he was very precise. And it takes greater precision to be precise about a fluid shape than it does about a solid shape. A solid shape you can specify. You can give it the angles you decide and the planes and the area, and you can be quite specific about that. It can be also very complicated, very complex. But to be precise about a living, moving fluid, that is, I think, really, that requires great skill.
Und die nicht langsamer. Diese Sechstel sofort und das Wasser.
Crescendo ist in der Mitte des Taktes. Nicht schon am Anfang. Sowohl bei Ihnen als auch war es viel zu früh. Nur ganz, und nicht so übertrieben stark. Das ist ganz das Melancholische. Machen wir es nochmal. Bitte recht legato. Nicht ja, dann ist wieder einer hängen.
Ich möchte eine Begebenheit erzählen. Da saß ich an meinen Pauken oben und ich hatte ja auch Komposition und Dirigenten studiert und legte immer eine Partitur auf meine Pauken, wenn ich nichts zu tun hatte. Ein Pauke hat ja manchmal viele Pausen. Und dann verfolgte ich die Komposition und bei der Probe tut man das Notwendige und man weiß, wie es bei der Probe klingt. Und ich schaute dort hinein und merkte plötzlich, es entsteht ein ganz neuer Klang. Also ein faszinierender Klang. Und ich dachte, was ist passiert? Und schaute zum Dirigenten, aber da war nichts Besonderes zu sehen. Ich schaute zu den Kollegen und die schauten zum Eingang. Und im Eingang stand Furtwängler. Der kam dort rein. Und allein seine Persönlichkeit, sein Auftreten, ohne etwas zu zeigen, ohne etwas zu tun, brachte diesen unendlich schönen Klang hervor. Also wer selbst den Klang so stark in sich trägt, dass er den Klang bei allen so herausfordert. Ich meine, das ist natürlich das, wie es schöner eigentlich nicht sein kann, nicht für ein Orchester, wenn man merkt, also dieser Mensch, der zeigt sich ganz offen und ja, und man ist eingeladen, es ihm gleich zu tun. Und dann musiziert man in dieser Weise.
three musicians of the unsurpassed Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by the renowned Dr. Furtwängler, rehearsed Brahms's Fourth Symphony for their concert that evening in the Empress Hall, Earl's Court. The Berlin Philharmonic was invited to Britain by the Dean of Oriel College, Oxford, leader of the movement called Christian Action, as a gesture of reconciliation.
those days, more cultivated days, the New York Philharmonic was broadcast every Sunday throughout the nation, Toscanini conducting. There was no television, of course, in those days. And that was the great cultural event that fashioned the musical audiences of that time in the whole of the United States. And I remember listening to a broadcast of his with my father somewhere on tour in Colorado. We were in a car, and that unmistakable Toscanini stamp was on it. It had naturally pace, precision, incision. Everything was as sharply defined as you could possibly imagine. That was his greatness.
Toscanini was very much the disciplinarian, and I would say instead of being an autocrat, he was more a dictator with the orchestra. But they had immense respect for him, and immense love and affection, and it was a marvelous orchestra. So that between his autocratic or dictatorial ways and their love and affection for him, they got along fairly well. Only occasionally would there be one of those famous temperamental outbursts on his part.
Piano piano, stringendo, dove finito? Contrabbassi, formi e corte note, short note, so, sembrano dei carri, non sono mica strumenti, oh Madonna Santissima, short note.
He had no interest in the technical side of recording, and Toscanini always just expected to hear on the finished product what he heard standing in front of the orchestra. And of course, in those early days, that wasn't always possible because of the limitations of his huge dynamic range. We were recording once one of the Respighi tone poems, and when he came up to listen to it, he felt the climaxes weren't loud enough. And the engineer said, but Maestro, if we make it any louder, it will break the equipment. And he said, break the equipment then.
Every great artist does thousands of things for which we have no method of writing on paper. We don't know how to do that. And we have to, through imagination, through feeling, through I don't know what, some instinctive quality that some artists have, we have to try to understand and reproduce and give to the listening public what we consider was in the mind and soul of the composer.
Leopold Stokowski was born in London, but managed to acquire an accent of indeterminate origin. It was all part of a natural showmanship which from time to time obscured the full extent of his talent. In fact, he was an expert conductor who could draw from any orchestra what became known as the Stokowski sound. That rich, lush quality developed during his 20 years with the Philadelphia Orchestra.
The flute has a solo. Instead of my conducting him, I follow him. I notice how he likes to phrase. Same with the oboe, or the clarinet, or the horn, or whatever is a solo instrument. Now, with the strings, I like the feeling of the violin that sounds like a voice singing, to give it what we call cantabile in music. This singing quality is a beautiful thing. You have to give them a little freedom and breadth to do that, and I admit I do that.
A lot of people still today look upon him as a charlatan, but he was a musician right through and through, and he knew exactly how to present himself to the world. But when it came to conducting, I still think there was no one before him or since who knew how to make an orchestra sound. You might not have agreed with the sound. It was terribly lush and sometimes perverse, but it certainly ravished your ear.
It wasn't charlatanry. He really did believe in it. He believed that the huge sort of Victorian organ sounds that he got in the Bach the toccata and fugue were justified. And when you listen to it, it's a terribly exciting sound.
Some conductors had techniques that were at best difficult to determine. Koussevitzky, for example, was a marvelous conductor, but completely by the power of his personality. And he did it in rehearsal, searching for ways to make the orchestra reach for something that he could not explain in words. And he screamed and yelled and cajoled in English, Russian, and French until he got what he wanted. Fritz Reiner was one of the most brilliant stick technicians that I ever heard or saw. He had the orchestra at the tip of his baton, and he used a baton about this long, and he would just gently, and then he would do the tiniest of motions, and then look at them and say, "Why don't you follow me?" There are many stories about him, but they're legion. But the man was an absolute master of every single moment when he was on that podium. He knew it all. It was all in his head, his ears, and his eyes looked. Now, any good conductor will tell you, as Reiner did very often, they use their eyes most intelligently. It's the eye as much as the hand. They're looking at the orchestra, they're looking at the men, seeing, are they watching the conductor, are they looking at the score? But at some moment, simply by looking, they make the musician look at them, and there's an eye contact. The musician knows that the conductor knows what's going on in his mind at that moment.
Was not a man of sentiment or sentimentality. The same time he once recorded The Dance of the Seven Veils, and Mrs. Reiner, who was always present, said to me, "Don't you think he should schmaltz it up more?" And I said, "Well, you know, depends." I said, "I'm sure he won't." So when he came down here to playback, I was the one elected to brave the lion, and I said, "Dr. Reiner, it's a marvelous thing. There's no editing involved. Would you want to do it once more just to make it a little more sensuous, a little more schmaltzy?" And he said, "No." And that was the end of that.
body motion, he got the most out of any orchestra. And if you talk to other musicians who played under Fritz Reiner, there was nobody who knew the score better than Fritz Reiner. He was flawless. All you had to do was just look at you.
I set out to build an orchestra which would combine the best qualities of the fine European orchestras, pre-war period, even pre-First World War period, with the finest qualities of the American orchestras in their best period. That is the impeccable intonation, the impeccable virtuosity, the brilliance, the smoothness of execution, which very often in America was an end in itself.
It's the Bell Telephone Hour.
You play it now absolutely 100% rhythmically, this ta-tam, pa-pam, pa-pa-dam, but at the same time it has a little bit of pedantry about it. Couldn't we just make pa-pam, pa-pam, pa-pa, not too much space, not demonstrating how rhythmically we are playing it, just naturally, pa-pam, with a little more resilience to it. Before C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Third and fourth horn with it, pa-pa-pam, coming in good time and preparing a good crescendo. Shadows, long quartz, long, almost a little too long quartz.
I didn't sack many. I was, you see, the Cleveland Orchestra was financially always very well endowed, so I could proceed with due regard to certain human considerations and could do it in a milder way. But there were, of course, moments of heartbreak and moments of unpleasantness. But then, of course, you arrive very soon at the point, and this point is now very much at discussion. What is the purpose of a symphony orchestra for which so many people give without compensation their time, I'm now talking about the board, and collect money. That's the way American orchestras are being run, as you know. There's no state or public money, just private money. What is the purpose? Is it the purpose of the symphony orchestra to make it possible to have the best of music, or is the purpose of such an orchestra to give their members the easiest and unchallengeably permanent job?
Oboe, please don't shortchange me in your very last note. No vanishing acts, please. F. Even more A. Don't sustain a lump of sound, sustain a dotted half note with the pulse of each quarter inside it. Then you know when to go on. Once more F. It has to be a little bit more sarcastic.
George Zell knew how the oboe breathed, so he would breathe with it. He knew how to give the oboe time to prepare the breath. He was a pianist and played wonderfully, but he bowed his scores for the string players. Some of them were funny at times, but they worked musically. He knew how to create the effect that he wanted with an up bow or a separate figure or a legato, whatever the case may be. He knew exactly what he wanted to hear, the kind of articulation or the kind of singing sound that he wanted given that composition, that place. And this is something that the orchestra musicians want to know.
Horns just a shade late, some of the horns. You must be prepared way ahead of time. I can't do better than to repeat this truism I think I said yesterday. Rests aren't there to rest, but to be braced for the next entry, to prepare and to be ready for it and to listen what's going on around you and to bring your next entry in so it makes sense and connects. To be ready with your breath, with your embouchure, everything, and with your general attitude. Resolution, alive. Suspense, no crescendo. Suspense, quick crescendo yet. One, più. Then 1 forte and 2 fortes.
Und das konnte die 100. Aufführung sein. Die war noch genauso faszinierend wie die erste. Denn er brauchte sich, er sah sich so als Mittelpunkt und musste da entsprechend sich engagieren für sich selber, für seine Karriere.
I confidently feel that for the greater part of public who has never been in a concert hall, they will get the idea. We've made some very queer experiences. First of all, in this time I was with my orchestra in Berlin in Japan. And last time we have been there was just one concert televised for people who were invited. This time every concert was televised. We have 18 concerts. And the estimate is that 25 million people watch these concerts. There is no getting around the fact this is the future and this is our times. And today it's maybe 25 millions. In 3 years, when we will do the thing from the concert, there will be 200 millions.
Karajan war der Erste, völlig anders. Er war nicht auf der Herstellerseite, sondern er war der fantastische Verkäufer. Nicht? Er verkaufte die Musik und er verkaufte sich, er verkaufte uns mit und das passt in unsere heutige Zeit. Nicht? Und deshalb, das hatten wir gespürt und deshalb wollten wir ihn auch haben. Nicht? Weil wir ganz deutlich wussten, wir haben jetzt damals unendlich viel Schönes kennengelernt. Auch Karajan wollte dieses Orchester haben, weil dieses Orchester den Klang Furtwänglers in sich trug. für uns war die erste Zeit nicht leicht, denn Furtwängler hatte uns flehentlich angeschaut und er hatte sich mit uns auseinandergesetzt. Und jetzt plötzlich wurden wir keines Blickes mehr gewürdigt. Nicht? Die Augen waren geschlossen und er stand dann so vorn und dabei nun diese glutvolle Musik dagegen setzen, nicht? Wenn man nicht angesprochen wird von dem Partner. Das war im Anfang sehr schwierig für uns. Später haben wir dann uns immer mehr aufeinander eingestellt. Karajan sich auf das Orchester und das Orchester auf ihn, sodass wir dann damit umgehen konnten.
No, that's not right. It's not enough. You must, I mean, please, almost no bow. I mean, just like breathing on the string, but in enormous left hand. I know it goes against your grain as a solo violinist to do that, but you must, to get this sonority of voices. It's got to be singing. It can't be just string playing.
There was a natural eruption of creativity in Lenny that spilled over into his interpretive and performing habits.
Violence!
He was not to everybody's taste always, and he did tend to over-gild the lily once in a while, but so wonderfully and so gloriously. He gave of himself, and he created this wonderful palace of sound and ideas and emotion, sheer emotion.
Was somebody who had a more of the physical energy of rhythm in his body, in his little finger, than any conductor I've ever seen before or since. I mean, it was not just that he danced on the platform in a way that was unpalatable to many people, but didn't worry me, because it seemed to me that he was not trying to say, look at me, I'm having a wonderful time, but he just couldn't prevent it. It was as natural to him as swimming. And he had this extraordinary ability to make the players go along with that rhythmical current.
If we ask what is it that music communicates to us, it's like all great art, that every human being is alone in a sense that he is locked up in the isolation of his own mind. And then you hear a piece of music and you feel he too has been through this. And it's almost as if the musician is saying to you, you're not alone, I am with you.